Stuart, can I turn to you now? And can you
Yeah,
say a little bit about your life for people who don't know your story? I imagine there's not many people out there. And also the way you've used your grief in your activism.
sure. I'm Stuart Lawrence. Really lovely to be here again with Grief, and to be talking about this because again, I think it's important that we are able to share our experiences to give insight, pass on knowledge, tips, uh, guides, if we can, to what people could be experiencing. Because I do believe as well that everyone's grief is quite unique to themselves, and their experience is quite unique to themselves. And there may be commonalities along the way, but it is quite a unique and personal thing. So for me, losing Stephen at 16 as well was a profound effect because him being my older brother, he was my guide, he was my leader, he was the person that went through different experiences before I did, and then in turn they showed me or told me what those experiences were like. So I felt quite lost for a while. I then shut down for quite a long time in my life. I now realise that I had a sort of emotion of going through, and I'd meet people, not tell them what happened to Stephen. When they found out, I'd always work in cycles of things. So, I finished at 16. I went to college for a year. I left there, didn't keep any friends. I went to another college for 2 years. Went there, never kept any friends. Went to university. It was always this thing about me reinventing myself and leaving behind when people knew or got to know me a bit better. And it's only sort of now that I've got to some sort of reached age of 40 something and just looking back and understanding the process I went through and the things that I did and the reasons why I behaved the way I did, and the reason why I said certain things is now quite powerful. And I think creatively, I've realized as well that it's a great motion to push you forward. And we talked about activism as well. And I heard recently that, when losing someone through quite a tragic and violent way, then anger is usually the first emotion. And I say to people all the time that I thought that anger would be a wasted emotion to have, but it's a great catalyst to start something. It's only a bad thing if you let it consume you and let it wash over you and that be the only driver in your life. But if you can use the anger that grief gives you to catalyze yourself to start something, and that project then be a way of you releasing yourself and explaining yourself and processing these thoughts and emotions is a great thing as well. So I've now realized that with that catalyst, we can start things. That could be the push. And that was the push that enabled us as a family to go on and seek justice. And I always say to people all the time, the things that's happened because we lost Stephen weren't things that we set out to do. There's the changes of the law, institutional changes, first of all those things were elements and things that happened along the way, but it wasn't the reason why we did them. The reason why we did them was because we were seeking and looking for justice for Stephen, and the sense of people not believing us and understanding where we came from and what we was about as a family was also quite a big driver at the time as well.
That's very powerful. I wonder if you have any memory of how you turned from a state where you were kind of more in denial, where you were running from the pain of what had happened to you and sort of reinventing your life, to the moment where you started using this grief to do something good in the world.
100%. I remember it exactly. It was 9/11. I was working in the Home Office at the time. I was on the minister's floor, which was the only one of those floors that had a TV. And I remember watching these vivid images of like planes going into buildings and people's hysteria. And then afterwards, the days perpetual after that, I started to realize and ask myself, like, what am I actually doing? How am I contributing to life? Life is so precious and so fragile that if I wasn't here tomorrow, what would I be able to say that I've left behind of my mark? What have I done? How have I contributed? How have I tried to make this place a different place? And I realized that, yes, as a civil servant, I could make that change, but it wouldn't be a very visible change. It wouldn't be very tangible. It's so far removed from what people actually realize of what you're doing. So I then realized that teaching may be the best avenue for me to do that. I always had people say to me along my journey in my education that, Stuart, great communicator, the way you explain things, have you ever thought about teaching? And I hadn't, because for me, teaching never came across as a glamorous, exciting, jazzy career. It really didn't seem like that. But once I did start teaching and I did start to realize the impact that you can have on young people, the influence, the knowledge building, the stories that you can share, the experiences that you can share with, especially with young people who may be going through similar things or experiences was an absolutely powerful thing. And I absolutely say to everyone all the time, like the time I had teaching has now helped and shaped me going forward to understand that I must now use what's happened to me and communicate in a different way and be able to put the message out a bit further and wider, because it's important for everyone to understand that about that whole thing about the fragility of life, and that tomorrow's not promised to no one. So in this day today, how can we make sure that we're maximizing and being the best individuals we possibly can and contributing back to life the best way we can as well?
That's beautiful. That's really amazing. It's interesting that it was, in a way, a kind of big national trauma, grief, loss that almost allowed you to connect back into your own more personal experience of loss. And can I ask, did your own feelings of grief change when you hit this moment?
Yeah, I suppose it's that whole thing about running away. You know, the running away, not accepting the whole thing of I'm okay, it's okay, it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. That whole mindset. I say to people all the time, like I went to school the next day after Stephen died. You know, I had this motion in my head of I want to know what's happened. Someone out there knows what's happened. I want to know. I must find out. I must pass this information on to my mum, who can pass it on to the police, so that we can get this justice that we want. So that was my first notion. And then I realized that I kept on going, and I've only stopped. So when 9/11 happened, I took 3 months holiday and then left the civil service and, you know, found my way and moved around. And I worked in Belmarsh prison. I just temped for ages before I went to teaching. And then since I've stopped teaching in 2018, I took a year out then again. And that was really powerful, just to have time. I always say to people that grief is one of those things that you need time. And that length of time that people need to get over it is such a piece of string for everyone. Like, how long is that for everyone? So, you know, I remember sort of like 18, 19 saying to my mum, oh, do you know what, before I go to university, I just want to go and do some traveling. She's like, oh no, if you stop now, I don't think you'll continue. You know, you're on a momentum thing, just keep going. I failed my first year at uni because my mindset wasn't ready for that next change. And it wasn't until I failed that first year, came back to London, again, worked 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, to realize that, wow, like life could be like this, to then sort of get me back on that bike of motion again. So I say to people all the time, having time to be able to reflect, to think, to center yourself, to ground yourself, to understand what you are going through, how it's affecting you. Again, like was just been said, it's almost like that iceberg thing. I do believe that, like, the way that you appear on top to the way that you appear underneath is two different things. It really is. That's
really powerful. And it really sends the message home that, you know, grief will wait for you, that you can't bypass it, you can't get around it. And if you try to run from it, it will still be there. And actually the way to make our lives meaningful and really to find joy is to have to go with it and not resist it, and to make space in your life for grief. And again, Clover's really powerful way of putting it, that grief is this part of her now. It's integrated in who she is, but it's also this incredible force, you know, that makes things happen. That's wonderful.